Hey guys, welcome back to Horsetooth Cinema Live. Today I am doing something basically to kind of get myself more like back on schedule with the channel and everything. I kind of realized I haven't uploaded a review for a new movie in quite a while, and I definitely want to get back onto that, regular schedule as much as I can. But before that, I want to go through a bunch of movies that I have watched that are 2023 releases, but that I haven't gotten around to reviewing on the channel yet, because there's quite a bit. I do see quite a few movies, even though I don't get around to reviewing necessarily everything on my channel. I'd like to change that, like I said, but I just want to cover a good amount of stuff today. I'm going to get into a couple comments if there are any real quick, and then I will pull up my letterbox list and we can just kind of go through it. First up, we got Leon. Hey, buddy, how's it going? He says, I see plane in the thumbnail. Kino's on the menu. Yes, it definitely is. I'll definitely get to plane, but spoiler alert, I had an absolute blast with that back in January. Cool. Looks like that's all we've got for now. So I will go ahead and share my screen here and pull up my letterboxd list. Okay, here we go. So first of all, apologies. There's some ads here as well. Anyway, but I just haven't upgraded my Letterboxd account yet. I will do that at some point. But so this is my list of like movies I've seen this year, and I have ordered it according to like when I logged it. So because I don't want to, and I also took off the rankings because I don't want to spoil that for my end of the year video yet. So I'm just going to go through all the stuff that I've seen, and I'll just go through everything on the list and kind of say what I've seen. And then if I haven't reviewed it, I'll do more in depth on it. So first up, we have The Old Way, which I did review on the channel. I gave that a 2 out of 5. I wasn't really huge on it, just was kind of disappointing me personally as a big Cage fan. But there's certainly aspects of it to like. I might revisit it before the end of the year, but I don't know. I'm not too keen about it. Then we have Skinamarink, which I also reviewed, and this is actually one of my favorite films that I've seen this year. I think it's definitely probably still in my top 5. Really, really unique horror film. I get why a lot of people don't like it, but for me, it was like, if you're on its wavelength, which I was, it was just really, really rewarding. And here I have, I think the first, oh no, I did talk about Sick. Yeah. I reviewed like The Old Way, Skinamarink, and Sick, I think, in the same video. I'll briefly, like, Sick is a really, really solid, like, kind of lean slasher film. Takes a lot from, things that we're all very familiar with, like Scream, but still, I was, pleasantly surprised by kind of how easy it was to power through kind of the more generic elements of it. I mean, you're not going to get a lot out of the story or the characters or anything, but just as a slasher, I think the set pieces are really, really well done. And it's still fairly high on my list, even though it's a very strong 3. I could see myself revisiting it and maybe giving it the upgrade, but I have to see. Okay, and then let's get to the first one, which I know for sure I haven't reviewed yet, and that is Plane, which Leon very kindly mentioned. So if you don't know, this is directed by Jean-Francois Richet. I really hope I'm pronouncing that right. And again, sorry for the ads here, guys. I'll try and close out of those. So basically what this film is about, there's a there's a standard flight that I believe is going somewhere. Is it across the Pacific or the Indian Ocean? Something like that. There's from the trailer, I kind of expected this to be a little bit more something like Nonstop, where there's like that's the Liam Neeson film, where there's like it's like there's terrorists on the plane sort of thing, but it's not really like that. It's more there's an emergency landing that takes place as a result of a storm, and this pilot and crew, everyone on the plane, I believe, survives, but they're stranded on this island in the Philippines or something like that. And, they're trying to figure out how to get rescued, but they later find out, and the movie kind of turns into Die Hard after that, because the island is run by local militia groups. and they're planning on taking passengers hostage. And the film is basically about Gerard Butler's character and Mike Coulter as well, who I think gives a really good performance in the film. Kind of, yeah, Die Hard style, working to get everybody out of this situation. And there's a lot of really cool character dynamics between them because, he's kind of, Gerard Butler is very much like a kind of a workman, pilot character, very kind of, for the most part, by the rules, if I remember right. And Mike Coulter, I believe, plays a criminal who was in handcuffs on the flight. And, they kind of have to put that aside and just kind of use their skills to get out of the situation. And there's a lot of really great character dynamics. I'm kind of curious to take a look at my review just so I remember kind of what I said about this. Yeah, definitely has like the whole criminal redemption arc thing going on. Like, with Mike Coulter's character, you're kind of very suspicious of him at the start of the film, especially when the film is maybe setting up that this could be something like Nonstop, like more terrorist angle. But then when you get to the island, he becomes, for me, one of my favorite characters in the film for sure. And you really kind of end up rooting for him in a lot of ways. And the film itself, I just found to be very gritty. Really, the action itself was staged pretty cleanly. It's very violent. It is, again, it's a lot of it is very derivative. And I think I mentioned here, it does take a long time to get going. That's for sure. It takes a lot for the movie to kind of reveal what it is and for the Die Hard stuff to get going. But once it does, I did find it to be really, really solid. It's definitely, I think it might still be like in my top 15 movies of this year, which probably means I need to see more, but no, I think this was like really solid. I had a great time with it back in the theaters. I'm just going to see if there's any comments yet. Maybe I'll just go back to this and just read some comments first, and then I'll get back to it. Leon says he's not doing too bad. Awesome. Yeah, great to hear. Best time to upgrade to Letterboxd is during Black Friday, so you can get Pro and Patreon for half price. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. I think is that October, November, somewhere around there. I think I'll probably go for it then. Leon says I'll have to check out The Old Way at some point, just as a Cage completionist. I think Cage completionism is the main reason to check it out. I can't really see anybody getting a lot out of it. I could maybe see some people giving it like a 6 out of 10, a 3-star kind of rating. There's some solid stuff going on. It's just, I really was kind of disappointed with how restrained Cage was in it. I was like, it's a revenge movie. It's a revenge Western. Like, there is some kind of like classic, cowboy shootout in it, but I don't know. I just kind of wished it could go a little bit further for me. Skinamarink is amazing. Top 5 of the year for me too. Nice. I really hope it stays in my top 5. I know at the end of the year, there's always stuff that comes out that just kind of blows my mind. And I remember last year, like my top 10, top 5 really changed a lot in the last couple of months. So that's probably going to happen again this year, but I hope Skinamarink kind of sticks around because it's really good. It's one of the better independent horror films I've seen in a long time, I think. I watched Sick the other day and it was decent, but I was hoping for it to have more impact given Hyams was directing. Yeah, Hyams, if you don't know, or I guess Leon clearly knows, but if other people don't know, he is the son of Peter Hyams, and he did like the Universal Soldier stuff with Jean-Claude Van Damme. So very, very cool, like, kind of direct-to-video director. But I can see where you're coming from there. I did like that a lot of the film kind of put Hyams like action sensibilities on display. Like there's a lot of it really, some of it is really directed with like these kind of wide angle lens digital action sensibilities. I thought a little bit about Malignant in that way and how like that's a horror film, but it's kind of directed like an action movie. But yeah, no, it's solid, but like you're saying, it's not like one that you're gonna get a ton out of like character wise or story wise or anything. Plane, yes. I did not hear about the sequel that they announced though. Lots of Gerard Butler stuff getting a sequel because I heard what is it? Den of Thieves is getting a sequel as well. Like they've shot Den of Thieves like Pantera, I think. in the last few months, and it's going to release sometime next year. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of here for it. Like Gerard Butler, I think is kind of, even when I don't like the movies, I like him. Like Olympus Has Fallen. I fucking hate that movie, but like I think he's really really solid in it. He gets some really kind of mean spirited things to do. Let me go back to screen sharing, and I will go back to another movie because I think I covered Plane pretty good. Yeah, it's a 3 out of 5. 6 out of 10 for me. Very solid. I hope it's definitely going to be in the honorable mentions for the end of the year, I would imagine. Yeah, very solid movie. Another one that I kind of didn't review earlier in the year, but I did catch up on not long after, was Megan, which is the film by Gerard Johnstone, and it's kind of was kind of the big Blumhouse hit in January, and there always seems to be one of those, or at least something like it. But yeah, no, I mean, I don't think I like this as much as some people like it. A lot of people in the kind of horror community, streaming community that I'm in, like, people are giving this like 8 out of 10s and saying it's kind of can hold up there with like the original Child's Play or something like that. I'm not really going to go that far with it, but I did think it was pretty solid. So if you don't know, it's about basically at the start of the film, this little girl, her parents they seem very like emotionally disconnected with her, and they're killed in a car accident. And this girl goes to live with her aunt, who is like a tech. She's very high up in like a tech company, AI kind of company, and she is not ready to have a daughter. Like very clearly, that's part of she's very much she's being the good person in this scenario, but she's very clearly doing it kind of unwillingly, and she doesn't seem to connect with the daughter very well. So to connect with her, she furthers progress on this AI doll they've been building, and they end up calling her Megan, which I don't remember exactly what that stands for, but the 3 is significant, I think. And yeah, I mean, it goes well at first. Like the daughter and Megan really connect well, but then kind of the more scary like AI stuff starts to come to fruition in the film, and the film does get it turns into something like Child's Play. I think would be a good comparison. For me, I don't think I had too much to say about it. I do want to check out the director's cut at some point, just because it did feel like they were, as far as the violence goes, I think they were kind of trimming it down a little bit more than they needed to. I don't remember if this is like a PG-13 movie or if it was rated R. It didn't feel very rated R. But I know people that have checked out that director's cut and have gone like, well, at least that cut of it is a little bit more violence. I don't know if that would elevate. I don't think that would elevate it to like a 4-star movie for me or anything. But I do want to check it out, just because I always think that checking out what the director intended is best when you're talking about film. It's very funny too. I mean, I definitely laughed a lot. I think they have I like that they don't take this like as seriously as possible. I mean, they take it seriously enough for the kind of horror thriller elements of the movie to work, but they don't like they still allow for some campy moments, like the dancing, obviously, that a lot of people were making jokes about on TikTok was very funny, and I definitely enjoyed that aspect of it. I just don't think it can stand up with like Blumhouse's best produced works, like Jordan Peele's Get Out, or Us even, or like what would be another one, like like Leigh Whannell's films like The Invisible Man, stuff like that. But it is very solid, and for a January Blumhouse release, I can definitely see why people kind of connected with this one for sure. So I'll move on to the next one. Let's see, because Infinity Pool I reviewed, Knock at the Cabin I reviewed, Scream 6. Ooh, it's time to talk about a controversial one. And that is Inside. I almost said directed by Willem Dafoe, but no, starring Willem Dafoe, directed by Vasilis Katsoupas. I'm very sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but I like this a lot more than I think most people will. As you can see, it's got like a 2.9 on here, but I gave it a 4 out of 5. Yeah, this is a very simple but very slow thriller about an art thief who they're pulling a job, a heist, and because of the very complex security system that this place has, he essentially gets trapped in there. He's and whoever owns it, I guess, isn't there. They might not even be aware that he's in there. So yeah, he's just kind of trapped, and he's kind of surrounded by a bunch of art and very few survival resources. A lot of the film is dedicated to him very logistically trying to figure out where to get water from, where to eat. But when he's not doing those very immediate survival instincts, he is kind of reflecting on the art around him. And you get a lot of very kind of slow cinema observations, and I especially liked how in this apartment that he's trapped in, you can still have a really good view of New York City around all of it. Like you can still see how much the city around him is moving, and yet he inside the apartment is trapped. The world is completely still for him. It's just I don't know. I especially, it reminded me a little bit of what Willem Dafoe has been up to with Abel Ferrara in the past 10 years or so. I'm thinking of stuff like 444 or Last Day on Earth or Siberia. Those are films where, basically about troubled people in claustrophobic situations. They might have to do a little bit with survival or just kind of facing your own death in general. And it's basically people reflecting on their own lives in very claustrophobic circumstances. And this has a lot of that going on. I can see, I don't think it's quite on the level artistically or thematically as those Abel Ferrara films, but I do think it's still pretty solid. And I remember getting a lot out of it. I actually saw this movie. I saw it in theaters, and I was the only person in the theater when I went to see it. And that was a great experience of just I just felt so personally connected to what was going on. I felt that this movie was kind of made for me at the moment to sort of reflect on how I was feeling, putting myself in Willem Dafoe's shoes. It was very immersive in that way, and I connected to it a lot. I'm worried if I revisit it, if I wouldn't like it quite as much, but I don't know. This is still in my top 10, I think, so far. I know a lot of people who a lot of my friends on YouTube who have seen this have not liked it as much, but and again, I totally understand that. I just think for myself, I connected to it quite a bit. So I definitely want to see what this director Vasilis Katsoupas does next. I think this was his second film or maybe first feature film. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check, but it really solid effort. And Willem Dafoe, one of my favorite performances of the year. Absolutely. I just love what he does always. And, maybe it's not quite as compelling as something like The Lighthouse, which is a similar premise for Willem Dafoe, but I still really liked it. So let's go through some other comments here real quick. Plane Sweep, I think we got there. Day of Reckoning is one of the best direct-to-video films ever made, if not the best. I think, this is the Jean-Claude Van Damme, Universal Soldier Day of Reckoning. Yeah, I definitely need to see that. Sick was really well directed. I totally agree. It was very, very lean, like I said, just kind of doing the essential nuts and bolts elements of something like Scream, for sure. Megan was something I really wanted to love, but I think it's pretty mediocre overall. There's fun to be had with it, but it feels pretty hacked apart. Felt like it should have been R-rated. Yeah. That's what I think I was remembering, is that I think it was rated PG-13, and maybe the director's cut is rated R. But I do want to check out that director's cut. I don't know if you've seen that, Leon. Maybe you can let me know. Oh, you mentioned it here. I know there's the unrated cut, but it's about 40 seconds longer and just adds CGI blood. So curious if there's a true R-rated cut for Megan out there. well, I'm sure it probably wouldn't exist it like, with real like a practical effect blood or anything, but if the CGI blood is what the director intended, maybe there's some more humor in that or something. Yeah, I mean, I'd be willing to check that out. Definitely agree. It feels toned down. Yeah, PG-13. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. That's what it felt like to me. Leon says, I need to see Inside. It's on my watch list for the year. Yeah, I recommend it, man. It's, again, not going to be for everybody, but I know you liked 444. I feel like if you liked something like 444 or Siberia, those kind of late period Abel Ferrara art films, vaguely genre films, you'll get something out of Inside. I think it's, again, I don't think it's quite on that level. For me, it is like a lighter 4-star movie. Maybe it would be like a 7 out of 10 for me, but yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, let me go back to StreamYard. Go back to Letterboxd, and we'll go on to something else. Here we go. So another movie that I caught up with earlier in the year, Boston Strangler. So I probably have very little to say about this compared to a lot of the other stuff I'm going to mention on here. I remember so little about this movie. So it's essentially like a serial killer procedural, but more about like the journalist. So in some way very similar to something like David Fincher's Zodiac. But I found it to be like such a derivative like version of something like Zodiac, and very toned down in terms of like all the character stuff that's brilliant in a film like that. You don't really feel, even though it is literally about characters being obsessed with a serial killer case, I think it gets so bogged down by like, I don't know, some of the like workplace stuff. I don't really feel connected to the case in the way that the characters would be, and I think that's like absolutely essential with a film like this. You don't want to feel like removed from it. You need to feel like immersed in what the characters are going through. I think it's maybe a good comparison would be like Zodiac meets Spotlight. Maybe that's just the Boston comparison talking about and the journalism thing. But yeah, what if Zodiac was boring core and Fincher wasn't good at shooting on digital? There's a lot of very good there's a lot of very like obvious like wide angle lens photography. Very I don't know, like it did feel very like derivative of Fincher, but not nearly with the level of craft that he puts into his thrillers, like Zodiac and Gone Girl, stuff like that. Yeah, I found it pretty boring. I just it just wasn't doing enough kind of new to really compel me. A lot of people are giving it like 3 stars, as you can see, but for me it was a 2. But not one that I like hated. This is like the quintessential I'm gonna forget about this like 5 minutes after I watch it kind of movie. So yeah. I'll go through something else real quick. Oh my god. Okay, are we doing this? Fine. Cocaine Bear. I skipped this in theaters, even though it was very popular at my local kind of art house theater. Because I saw the trailer and it just looked like the worst thing in the world. It looked like, so I don't have anything against, monster movies, of course. I love stuff like that. I love schlock. I love, movies about an animal rampage sounds great. Add cocaine into it. It's, it's a little too self-aware, even that own idea, but you could do a film that makes it work. But the film itself has to, I think, either go for like, Jay Bauman on Red Letter Media talked about this, about how you either need to go for like absurdism, like the Elizabeth Banks connection, something like Wet Hot American Summer, where like nothing in the film is taken seriously, but it's like so weird and bizarre that the humor kind of comes from that. Or you need to actually take it seriously like a thriller. And, you could spur some humor in there occasionally, and, the situation is ridiculous, but like the character stuff needs to work. The thriller elements need to work. But this movie kind of goes very much in the middle of like full on just like SNL comedy, like where I think I had a lot to say about this. Yeah. Yeah, it's just so like in love with the concept of itself. I mean, I think if I go back to the tagline of it. I think the tagline of the film is "Get in line." I don't know if it says that somewhere here. Oh yeah, here we go. Get in line. Yeah. So it's just like, hey, we've got this great premise. Like that alone is going to get you through this movie, and it doesn't. It's really not that funny. It's like the character stuff in the movie is insanely like, a bad SNL sketch. And what you're left with, since the comedy isn't funny, it doesn't go for that kind of absurdism, really weird stuff. You're left with the fact that Elizabeth Banks cannot direct a genre movie for shit. Like the action set pieces and horror set pieces are really bad. I thought for the most part, there's not any way of tension in the film. I will say the ambulance moment was okay. I could see that working in a better film, but at that point in the film, it happens pretty late, I think, in the film. I was so like checked out of it. I was so angry with what I was watching that it just really didn't register with me. There is a film I did mention in my review. It's called Wild Beasts, directed by some Italian filmmaker that his name is escaping me. But basically, what happens in that film, and I think this film is much better than Cocaine Bear, is there's a zoo in Germany or something where somebody infects the water supply with PCP, and all the animals just go completely apeshit and start killing everybody at the zoo. And it's, there's probably some unethical aspects to the film, I'll say that, but you could basically do that kind of film nowadays with just CGI and have it be ethical. But the thing that works about it is that the comedy just kind of speaks for itself, because it's an insane premise, and watching people get mauled by animals is just kind of funny in this scenario. Whereas Cocaine Bear, it's not confident enough. Weirdly, it doesn't seem confident enough in just the premise alone. I'm almost contradicting myself here, right? Because it's like on one level, it's so confident in the premise that it thinks it doesn't have to do anything else, but on the other hand, it's not confident in like the comedy of the situation speaking for itself, so it has to like congratulate itself and do all this really stupid SNL humor. I fucking hated this movie. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's the worst film I've seen this year, and I'm very sad that Lord and Miller have their names on this, because I really adore what they do most of the time, but I just could not believe that they decided to put their names on this. And Elizabeth Banks should also be very ashamed of herself for doing this. I haven't seen much other. I haven't seen like her Charlie's Angels remake or anything, but wow, this was a miss for me. I'm gonna go back to StreamYard and go through some comments real quick. So Leon says 444 is pretty great. Yeah, no, I really like 444. I should maybe I'll do an Abel Ferrara rank sometime after I kind of finish his films, but that is a really weird but very cool kind of art film in a lot of ways. Leon says, I haven't seen Boston Strangler, but I know it was something nobody would shut up about when it premiered. Yeah, I don't know. That's interesting, because again, I kind of feel like I forgot about it like 5 minutes after I saw it. Like it's like the most nothing burger of a film I've seen this year, like the most zone out like thing I've seen. So I don't know. Maybe I should watch it again or something. But yeah, this was not a lot there for me. He also says Cocaine Bear is something I honestly didn't hate. Okay. It's not great, and there's a lot of things that kind of blow about it, but I had some fun with it. Yeah, and there's the most like 5 out of 10 film ever. I completely get people despising it because it's not very good. Yeah, like I agree with you that the ambulance set piece is it's okay. It's not like it's not as bad as the kind of comedy and all that's like surrounding it. It's not as like obvious with the jokes and kind of lazy. But I also, again, I just think Banks, like her direction, it just wasn't, there's no tension to it at all. Like at that point in the film, I completely checked out. So I just did not care. If you were kind of, mildly entertained sparsely throughout, I could see that set piece working better for you. But I don't know. For me, it's one of the films that angered me the most, I think, this year. And there's a couple others I'll get to, but Got the classic Winslow wave. Hey man, how's it going? Thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. Yeah, let me know what you thought of some of the releases I'm talking about so far. I'm always curious as to your thoughts for sure. All right, let's go back. Keep going through some stuff here. All right, let's see. So, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, I reviewed. Love that film. One of my favorites of the year, along with Oppenheimer, the only film I've given 5 stars to so far. Yeah, if you're curious as to more of my thoughts, you can check out my review. Same can be said for Renfield, but only as far as you can see my thoughts on my channel. I hated Renfield so much. It was really disappointing for me as a Nick Cage fan. I wanted to see his Dracula work a lot better than it would, and everything around him was just awful. Like the comedy was so bad, so obvious, so like SNL. Yeah, I could not stand that movie. Ghosted, another very, very, oh my god. Okay, so I don't know how much I want to say about this, but it's okay. So basically, what happens is this guy Cole meets this woman Sadie in a very like kind of cliche rom-com, meet cute kind of situation. They have this really cringy soundtrack that plays like Portugal the Man, with all of their meetings and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a really cringy rom-com for like the first like 20 minutes of it, and then it becomes a like spy globetrotting secret agent movie. I guess the closest thing I could compare it to would just be something like Red Notice, just because there's so many, like the action's very bad, very. You don't really get a good sense for kind of what's going on in the scene. It's very the continuity of framing, I would say, is pretty bad. But then it really just depends on lame comedy, very similar to like Renfield and Cocaine Bear, and cameos for sure. And my nemesis Ryan Reynolds has an awful cameo in this movie. Yeah, it's not the worst premise in the world. Like I kind of like the idea of like if these characters had chemistry, I could see this movie working, because it's like you get swept up in the surprises of Ana de Armas's character, and you kind of like if you kind of feel the chemistry between them, you buy the whole globetrotting thing a lot better. But there's nothing in the way of chemistry, and this movie to me felt like the most streaming movie of the year. It's just like there to exist and like to be on Apple Plus, and I don't know why people as talented as Chris Evans and Ana de Armas would stoop this low, because I just like I don't know. It was very strange. It was very much like this is a money laundering scheme. Like who has dirt on Chris Evans and Ana de Armas to make them do something like this? Because these people are really, really talented, and their chemistry together just as actors works a lot better in something like Knives Out. So yeah, I don't I don't have that much more to say about it, but I really hated watching it. I know some people have gotten some mild enjoyment out of this and stuff, but I don't get it. But that's Ghosted for me. Let me go back to StreamYard. Renfield is horrible. Yeah, I don't like to just like be the guy who harps on movies. I like to. If I want to share my negative thoughts, I like largely. I really, really try for it to come from a place of constructive criticism, and for Renfield, it's like there's definitely a lot of potential there. I mean, like Nick Cage is very obsessed with like German expressionist filmmaking, and I'm sure he's a massive fan of many incarnations of Dracula. And I didn't hate his version of it, but I hated the movie around him for sure. I just think that nothing in the movie was supporting his performance enough for it to really register very much. And then Ghosted was kind of abysmal too. Yeah. So I think I think those are all of the 1-star movies I've seen. So the rest of this stream will be less negative than it's been so far. We got Winslow saying Ghosted was horrible. I felt like one of those parody film a character watches in a comedy film. Yeah, it's like exactly. No, it's a lot of streaming films feel like that. And I think in the age we're about to enter where AI is going to start writing movies, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more things like Ghosted out there. Because you do watch it and you're like, a human wrote this? Like, I don't know if this would pass the Turing test, but okay. Let's get back to Letterboxd. Okay, so Ghosted we did. I did review Evil Dead Rise. Solid sequel, a little bit cynical, but I definitely enjoyed like the third act of it. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, not perfect, but I really had a good time with James Gunn's kind of send off for this. A bit tonally inconsistent, but like, it's really nice to see a filmmaker with a visual style and kind of comedic sensibility approach these Marvel movies and actually do it well. So I really enjoyed that in that way. Next film I haven't talked about is Clock, which is a film I believe that's on Hulu. So I just kind of watched this one that I saw my friend Mike from Did You See That had reviewed it, and I think a couple other people had as well. Somebody from the Intercut podcast I think talked about it as well. So this is basically a kind of psychological thriller. On the eve of a woman's 38th birthday, she attempts to fix her broken biological clock. So it's a little bit more, the setup's a little bit more, there's a bit more to it than that. Basically, everybody in this woman's life is telling her that her clock is ticking, her biological clock, and she needs to, have a baby and all that. I think she's getting pressure from like her husband or something as well. And and then she goes through this kind of bizarre like science fiction horror like program, think of something like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good thing to compare it to. But basically, she goes through this program to try and fix her biological clock. But spoiler alert, it's doesn't go so well. It's very there's a lot of ulterior motives. So I think what I really didn't like about this film is kind of how kind of on the nose and like overly simplistic it was with a lot of its imagery and metaphors. It uses, I mean, you can see in the poster here that's it's got the whole like cradle and everything. There's a lot of very like just cookie cutter ideas that you kind of take away from the motifs and like the images that are repeated in this. I think I had a fair amount to say about it, so I'm going to pull up my review so I don't ramble too much. But yeah, this was one thing. When I watched it, I kind of thought, because of how obvious the imagery was, I was like, a man definitely directed this. This is like a man who doesn't understand the whole biological clock, societal pressure thing, trying to do this. And it wasn't. It was actually directed by a woman, which really surprised me. I thought that a woman would understand this more authentically, because this kind of felt to me like a bit like Alex Garland's Men, and how that film has a lot of like, Freudian like sexual imagery in it, but it doesn't really amount to anything. It just kind of builds to nothing. It doesn't, and it's not clever. It's very like cookie cutter and on the nose in terms of that. And it was just kind of incompetent, in the way it was used in like a psychological thriller. The things are taken, ideas about like having kids, like the cradle and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of egg imagery in the film. There definitely is. That stuff is taken to like a very dreamlike extreme, but they're so over the top in how they're used, and they're so obvious that really I just kind of found them more funny than scary. Which I don't think was the intention. It definitely is a film that takes itself pretty seriously. I loved the image of when like there's a part where like a woman and her baby, I think on an umbilical cord, is turned into like a grandfather clock, like swinging back and forth. kind of retrospectively, it reminded me a little bit of like Freddy Got Fingered in that way. So I don't know. That was kind of funny, but I don't think it was intended to be funny. So that was definitely something I struggled with. The aesthetic of the film's pretty boring. It's very like, digital kind of streaming look to it. Yeah, and the script is just kind of melodramatic. There's not much weight to what's going on. I didn't really care too much for the characters, so it's not a bad idea for a film. Certainly, I think I could see this material being done decently by another filmmaker, maybe. But yeah, it just kind of felt like a streaming film, not very well thought out for the most part. And I did have a lot to say about it initially, but I think this is another one that for me would be something like Boston Strangler, and that I've mostly forgotten about it since. And Leon says I still need to see Clock. Yeah, I mean, check it out. It's I think it's in the US. It's on Hulu, so that probably means it's on Disney Plus in the UK, I'm guessing. So if you're interested in checking it out, for me, it was very much like genre movie completionism. Like I like to go through and find maybe potentially underrated genre stuff, which I will still get to, because there's definitely stuff that I haven't talked about yet that I did like more and kind of thought was underrated. So down to something I liked more. Let's talk about Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. So first of all, I just want to make a little joke that with this title, I don't know if that's like a subtitle, like the Honor Among Thieves thing. I don't know if that's something like from the game, but it just weirdly reminded me a lot of like Den of Thieves. I kind of wished it was called D&D Den of Thieves. That's just, anyway, that's totally separate. But anyway, so this is adapted loosely from the RPG game. A charming thief and a band of unlikely adventurers undertake epic heists to retrieve a lost relic, but things go dangerously awry when they run afoul of the wrong people. I thought this was like a very standard, but pretty solidly made kind of adventure movie. They set up all the plot stuff well about that quest and everything that you would kind of see in a D&D campaign. It is too long, I think. Isn't it like 2 hours or something like that? I'm trying to see if I can find the length of it. But yeah. 100. Yeah, no, it's over. It's like 2 hours and 15 minutes. Yeah, it's way too long for what it is. But it was pretty funny, and I thought, for these kind of very digital studio action adventure movies, I thought it looked all right and was directed decently. Who is this dude again? I don't remember his name, but he was really funny in the movie. Hugh Grant. Yep, that's it. And then I want to give a shout out to Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez. I think they actually just work really well in these kind of roles. I think they're these kind of B action movies nowadays. I think Chris Pine and Michelle Rodriguez are really like charismatic stars, and I will say not all of the humor worked for me. I remember there's a line, I mentioned it somewhere. Oh yeah, so there's a part where they're surrounded by these creatures that like prey on intelligence, and so the idea is that if the creatures can smell your intelligence, and then they'll kill you immediately if they discover you. So and then it just cuts to these creatures just like walking past them and not noticing them, which is funny. But I feel like the script wasn't really confident enough in the humor, because there was a part where Chris Pine goes after that and he was like, well, that was hurtful. And I was like, you don't really need to say that. Like the joke was, obvious enough. Like you can just kind of, I think it would be funnier if it just cut to the next scene after that. I think there was a lot, and there were other kind of moments like that in the comedy where, again, it just kind of felt like they have to acknowledge the joke too much, which kind of takes away from the humor a little bit. But still, no, it's I remember laughing a decent amount, for sure. And there is some kind of weird details. There are some kind of weird details in the film, which from people I know who've played the game a lot, they appreciated. I personally I don't have much attachment to the game. I played it like a couple of times with some friends. But I definitely, I think I mentioned towards the end here, I did kind of wish that it went like really weird because the film did bomb regardless. And I was kind of like, well, if the film's going to bomb, why not make it something like Howard the Duck? Just like insanely weird, really bizarre, but definitely true to what, very, very confident in what it wants to do. I think that could have been more interesting. But again, I really did appreciate kind of solidly directed action sequences and, charismatic performances that carried through for me what was otherwise kind of a overly long film for sure. Very solid. I doubt I'll be revisiting this much though. Winslow says, I thought Dungeons and Dragons was okay. Competently made, but considering the absolute disaster I thought it was going to be when I initially saw the trailer, I was surprised. Nothing too special though. Yeah, for sure. Like I also thought it was going to be a disaster when I saw the trailer. It was like, there's no way they're going to be able to adapt the kind of weirdness of D&D campaigns to the screen. And they don't, but I was surprised like how well they were able to pull off a kind of more generic version of it. It is generic, but I was like, oh, it's definitely entertaining for sure. Leon says D&D was decent. I wasn't in love with it by any means, but I really admire what they were going for. The Tubby Dragon sequence was my favorite part. That was great. I don't know why I didn't mention that in my review. That was really funny too. Yeah. Michelle probably gives one of her best performances. She's really fun. Yeah. The practical effects ruled when they were on display. Yeah, I'd have to go back to it, but I think I remember, was there like some slime, like kind of creature detail? I'm trying. It's been a while since I watched this one. And again, it didn't leave a huge impression, but I think I remembered thinking the practical effects were all right too a couple times. Winslow says, have you seen Blackberry? It's on my top 5 of the year. I love Matt Johnson. Currently making my way through Nirvana, the band show, and it's great. I'm so like disappointed in myself that I haven't seen Blackberry yet. When it came out in theaters, I kind of dismissed it. I was like, like a product, another like one of these like product movies, kind of like Air or the Flamin' Hot Cheetos movie or whatever. But then, because I didn't really know much about Matt Johnson, and everybody I've heard who's seen the film has said it's like phenomenal. So I'm definitely going to check it out. I'll check tonight or something if it's like cheap for rental or if it's on a streaming service somewhere. Because if it is, I really want to check it out because I think it would probably be in my top 10 at least so far, from what I've heard about it. Yeah, Blackberry was amazing. Yep, no, I've heard really good things. Okay, let's see what else there is. I don't want to drone on too much here. But okay. So here's one that another streaming movie that I haven't covered yet. Reality. So this is directed by Tina Satter, who I believe was like a playwright before this film. This is a story that she managed to adapt to the stage a couple years ago or something like that, and she figured out how to turn it into a feature film, and she got a deal, I think, with Hulu or no, it's on Max, I think, in the US, actually, my bad. And yeah, so this tells the story that happened. I remember when this happened in the news. This was about 6 years ago. It's about a 25-year-old named Reality Winner. Very interesting name, but that is the real name of the person. So she returns from getting groceries to find 2 FBI agents at her house in Georgia. And she's basically an Air Force veteran, and she's a yoga instructor. And the film is about the time she spends with them at her house, sort of being questioned about her work with U.S. intelligence when she was working as an intelligence contractor. And what they're alleging is that she leaked a classified document that exposed Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. elections. And so it's very It's very practical, like one location, mostly one timeline, kind of thriller. Because and I really think that the situation that she's in is incredibly tense, and a lot of it really comes down to how good Sydney Sweeney is in this film. I think she's just phenomenal. I think this is one of my favorite performances of the year. She really sells like the anxiety of the character, and you kind of gradually see her unravel, because she's very like, even though I'm sure she kind of knows in her head what's going on, as soon as the people get to her house, she acts like she doesn't really know what's going on. And then once they start to question her more, you really kind of see her unravel, and start to kind of fess up to what she actually did. And I did struggle with it a little bit. As you can see, I gave it like a strong 3 stars out of 5. For me, the main issue was just that it still felt a little bit too much like a stage play. I wish there were more like visual details that brought out kind of what the story is going for thematically. One thing I did really like though was the basically when because the entire screenplay and stage play is based on the actual transcripts of what happened. And whenever something that has been redacted from the transcript occurs, the film like blips it out. There's this like really weird like digital effect that occurs to kind of cut out what's said, which I like, because it's obscuring the information from the audience, because neither the audience nor the filmmaker knows what was said really. So yeah, I mean, I thought that was solid. I just wish I could have a little bit more in the way of kind of visual style from it, but yeah, no, it's very competently made, and mostly I think I really like this because it's a story I think more people should know about. It's very small scale, but it really does say a lot about kind of privacy in the U.S., as well as like if you look into the Espionage Act of 1917, under which Reality and other people like Edward Snowden were prosecuted, or I guess in the case of Snowden would have been prosecuted. It's really infuriating that still exists, because that statute was created during World War I to crack down on dissenters of the war, and it still exists to now be used against whistleblowers. So if you are a whistleblower, if you do anything that the government disagrees with at your job there, you can be given a extremely harsh prison sentence, which she was. I believe there's no one who's been given the prison sentence that she got for what she did. I think that's kind of the message that they get out there, and I think they do it well. Maybe I'll revisit this before the end of the year, because it is really, really solid. I enjoyed it a lot. Let's see. Top 5 of the year for me too. I think talking about Blackberry. Winslow says, "Cool, Leon. The Dirties and Operation Avalanche are really good too." And Leon says that The Dirties is fantastic. That's another Matt Johnson thing, if I'm not mistaken. Seeing the Nirvana band. Have you seen Nirvana, the band, the show? I haven't seen it. I don't know if Leon has. Leon says, "Jackson, you probably love Blackberry. It has fantastic performances. I adore the style. It's just so damn good." The closest comparisons I can make are Danny Boyle's Steve Jobs and The Social Network. I haven't seen Steve Jobs, but I really like The Social Network. It's not one of my favorite Fincher films, but it's kind of hard to deny how good it is. Yeah, no. So if it's anything like Social Network, I think I'll really enjoy it. And talking about Reality, Leon says he really liked it. Yeah, it's no, I've heard mostly really good things from people about Reality. I think it has like a 3.4 on Letterboxd, which is that something? Let me go back to it. 3.3. Yeah, it's very solid. It's again like too stagey for me, but I really, really enjoyed the performances and kind of the screenplay. So all right, let's move on to Rye Lane, which is a film that I absolutely adored. This was a really kind of refreshing rom-com for me, which I don't. Rom-coms, I like every now and then, but they're definitely not my thing. But this one I just I just really adored. So the basically what happens is, so there's this guy who has recently broken up from a this guy has recently broken up from a long-term relationship, and he's very much reeling from it. He's actually about to go meet his ex and her new boyfriend for lunch or something like that, and he's very uncomfortable with the situation. So with this, he ends up meeting God, what are the characters' names? I've kind of forgotten, and doesn't. Oh yeah, okay. So Dom and Yas. Yes, that's their names. Okay, cool. I think, right? Yeah. So they meet up and they start basically like the film is essentially doing like a riff on Before Sunrise or something like that, where these characters kind of meet up happenstance and they walk around the city and talk about their experience and maybe romantically connect over it. Basically, I don't want to spoil too much of where it goes, but that's kind of the setup. So I think a lot of romance movies can get trapped in the can get trapped in trying to be Before Sunrise, because it's just it's essentially a perfect movie, and it's a really simple kind of formula. And I was really worried for a while that this was just going to do that. But there's a point in the film where it makes a decision to become like not that at all. It becomes a different type of romance and a different type of way in which the characters connect. And in a way I found to be really compelling. And I also just really loved the filmmaking in it. I think there's a lot of really cool kind of Edgar Wright style editing, a lot of like wide angle lens photography, and all of that stuff. I think I said that it feels referential to stuff like Edgar Wright, but it doesn't feel derivative. It feels used. The way it's used feels really fresh for the most part. And the main reason I really liked this was it's so funny. Like there's so many moments where I just completely cracked up, and which is not something I usually say about a rom-com. Even ones I've liked in the past few years, like last year, Cha Cha Real Smooth came out, the Cooper Raiff movie. I definitely found a lot of moments in that to be funny, and overall I found it like pretty cute and everything. But I was never like, just rolling back in my chair, just laughing my ass off. And in Rylance, I was a couple times. It was really, really funny. So yeah, I gave it a 4 out of 5. And I think it's in my top 10 right now. I hope it stays there. Kind of. I mean, I would like to see some new stuff later in the year that could replace it. But at the same time, it would be really cool to have a rom-com on my top 10, because that I can't really imagine that happening very often. But yeah, no, I highly recommend Rylance if you haven't seen it yet. So in the US, it's on Hulu, and I believe elsewhere, like in the UK, it's on Disney Plus. I'm just gonna go back to right here real quick. Leon says the Force Awakens episode of the Nirvana the band the show is nuts, and Rylance is great. Yeah, it's it was a big surprise for me, because again, I don't gravitate towards this kind of stuff, but wow, it was just amazing. I loved it. So let me go back. Oh yeah, and definitely keep an eye out on Rain Allen Miller, I think, is the director of Rylance. I cannot wait to see what she does next. Because again, I would like to see her develop her own style even further. Because I was very, very impressed that while she's pulling from, things like Before Sunrise or Edgar Wright or whatever, how fresh it kind of felt. And if she can do that with, I think this might be her first like feature film. If she can do that this early in her career, I think she's gonna go to some very cool places later on. Okay, so next is another rom-com that I surprisingly kind of enjoyed. No Hard Feelings, which is directed by Gene Stupnitsky. I think he did that movie Good Boys or something like that before. And this stars Jennifer Lawrence and Andrew Barth Feldman. Basically, the premise is that Jennifer Lawrence's character, she's like late 20s or something like that. Or yeah, 30, I think she actually is. She's on the brink of losing her child at home in kind of this wealthy, I think it's supposed to be Montauk. It's some like northeastern kind of seaside town, and basically she's looking for ways to make money, and these very wealthy helicopter parents of this 19-year-old Percy put up an ad that's like, "Hey, can somebody come date our son? Because he's about to leave for college and he's very introverted and all this stuff." So she, ideally, I think the parents are looking for somebody who's not 30 years old, who's a lot closer to the age of Percy's character. Although I can't really imagine like somebody his own age wanting to do that. I don't know. It's very. What I like about this setup is how like kind of transactional it is. Like she just needs this for money, so she's gonna do this kind of sleazy, fake relationship thing. It reminds me a little bit of like kind of Paul Verhoeven's work about like relating to sex. Like Showgirls, Spetters, something like that. It's kind of reducing sex and relationships to transactions because that's kind of just how society is. But anyway, so that's the setup, and Maddie kind of discovers that Percy being in a relationship is not a sure thing at all. It's very difficult, and they kind of, but they do end up connecting and kind of hitting it off in a friendship kind of way, and maybe it develops into something else. I don't want to say too much about where it goes, but yeah, it's a R-rated rom-com, and it was kind of a hit, I think, in theaters, if I'm not mistaken. I have to look back at it, but I think some of the comedy feels a bit studio-like. It feels a little bit toned down to kind of suit general audiences, I think. Again, but there are some moments that really go for it. Like I love the fight scene that everybody talks about, where Jennifer Lawrence gets completely naked and starts beating the shit out of some teenagers. Like that is just what we need at the motion pictures in the summer. I really love that. I think she just gives a really good comedic performance in general. I've kind of forgot like how funny she is, or how funny she can be sometimes. And I think the kid who plays Percy gives a good performance for what he's asked to do as well. I think the main issue with it is just that like it's trying to like kind of do a little bit of almost like social commentary again, with like the idea that these relationships are all precluded by kind of transactional forces in society. Again, the way that like early Paul Verhoeven would do. It just doesn't land. It's not the satire isn't as biting. The commentary isn't as kind of in depth as those movies would be, but I appreciated the attempt, and I thought a lot of it worked. So very solid movie. I would give it a strong 3 out of 5. Let's go through some comments. No Hard Feelings probably has the best fight scene of the year. Yeah, it really does. I don't know. John Wick 4 is pretty great too, but but it was that was fun. I mean, like I kind of up until that point, I in the movie, I kind of felt like I'm like, where's all the raunchiness? Where's like, because it was kind of being hyped up as like really raunchy and R-rated, and it wasn't. And then that scene happens, and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see it a little bit. I still don't think it's as like crazy as its reputation maybe suggests, but like it's a lot of fun. Like it's one of those movies I've seen this summer that I'm like, how can you not have a good time with this, you know? So, nice. No Hard Feelings was fun. Nice to go and see an R-rated summer comedy that wasn't a complete dud. Absolutely. Like that's the thing is like, and we don't need these movies to be like 10 out of 10 amazing. But just like a solid one would be nice. And I think that's what our No Hard Feelings was. And I heard similar things about Joyride, which I actually haven't seen yet, but I'm very looking forward to checking that one out as well. Yeah, she totally goes for it. Like I had kind of felt like for a while because obviously her breakout role was like Winter's Bone, which is an incredible performance. And then kind of after that, she became like the Hunger Games star and kind of became like this Hollywood darling, and I think started taking safer roles for the most part. There's some bold ones here and there, like Silver Linings Playbook, and all that, but this one, yeah, it was like she just doesn't care. She just like completely goes for it and owns it. Really liked it. Yeah, but does John Wick 4 have Keanu ball naked? I wish it did. That'd be great. But it certainly doesn't have Jennifer Lawrence bollock naked. So that's a loss for John Wick 4. All right, we got a few more here for sure. Let's see. So here's another one, Sanctuary. So this is directed by Zachary Wigan. I don't know how to pronounce that. This is a chamber thriller starring Christopher Abbott and Margaret Qualley. Basically, Christopher Abbott plays this very rich man who is about to take over his family company, his hotel company. And it's revealed kind of throughout the first 30 minutes or so that he's hired Margaret Qualley's character to be this like dominatrix, to basically like get him for him to overcome psychological difficulties that he's having with this new responsibility. Very Freudian movie, very weird, because one thing I really liked about it is that all of the domination stuff in the movie, a lot of it really isn't that overtly sexual, but it kind of works for the film because I think the film is getting at like the fact that all of these expectations that are placed on really rich people like this kind of manifest themselves into very like repressed sexual like Freudian outcomes, and it kind of brings that out pretty subtly, I think, and that was one thing I really appreciated about it. I really think it works well as a chamber thriller. Let me close out of this. Sorry guys for the ads. Yeah, it's a really effective kind of chamber thriller. Like the one location stuff is utilized well. You really get to understand the geography of the hotel room and the hall and the elevator and all that stuff throughout. Like all that becomes very important. And I think when I finished the movie, I was like, it very cleanly gets to the conclusion that it gets to. And if you look back on it, it's like fairly obvious in how it did that. But at the same time, I kind of think that that artificiality works for it, and maybe the like predictable is the wrong word, because I think when you're watching the film, it's certainly not predictable. Like it's definitely the film is always in a different place than you think it's going to be, and I think that's kind of the strength of it for the most part. But with that, it's like you can look back on it and kind of be like, oh, like, you know, because it was doing this and this and this, it kind of gets to the conclusion fairly cleanly. But I think that like, the fact that that you're getting that this rich person is going to this conclusion, I think the idea that that's inevitable is really smart, and the fact that you don't know it's inevitable throughout, I think is kind of clever, and the reason why I ended up enjoying it so much. It's like the whole film is kind of a joke about how like Freudian and sexual all these like class and gender dynamics that we set up are, and really what I liked about the film so much was the dialogue and the performances. I think Margaret Qualley might be my favorite performance, both from her and performance of the year so far. I just love her as an actress. I think she's really fit for strong female characters that could kind of own a movie in like the 70s. I think that's part of why I'm really excited for Cohen's Drive Away Dolls. I think she just looks really fit for that kind of thing. Yeah, I think the two performances and just the dialogue, I think, make this work a lot better than it maybe should on the surface. So I think I like this a little bit more than a lot of people would. I gave it a 4 out of 5. 8 out of 10. So yeah, highly recommend this. I think it's just on VOD right now, so if you can get it that way or be more creative about it, Would definitely suggest checking this out before the end of the year. Currently, I think this would be in my top 10. Yeah. Winslow says, I need to check out Sanctuary. I've heard good things. Yeah, it's definitely a hidden gem. I remember seeing the trailer when I went to see How to Blow Up a Pipeline. I saw the trailer for it, and I was like, I need to watch that like yesterday. That's great. Yeah, definitely check it out, Leon. I know Josh was a big fan as well. So yeah. Okay, let's see what's next. Speaking of Josh, I think this is his favorite film of the year so far. This is Past Lives, directed by Celine Song, who I think is also another, like, I don't know if this is her first film or if it's like her second or something like that, or if she's done short films, but she's a pretty new filmmaker. But this is a pretty ambitious feature for her to make, and I'll talk about kind of what worked for me about it, but for how ambitious it is, I was pretty impressed. But basically, it's about these two Korean people, Nora and Haesung, who are they're really good childhood friends. It kind of sets that up. The film sets that up in the opening, but then eventually they're torn apart because Nora's family moves to Canada, I believe. Yeah. And I think she ends up living in New York afterwards. But like 20 years later, they're reunited. And they, or maybe even like, I think it's maybe 10 or 15 years later, they're reunited just online. And then that kind of fades out a little bit. But at one point, Haesung actually decides to go and visit her in New York City. And it's weird because she is married now and he isn't. And he still clearly has feelings for her and she might have feelings for him. But they kind of confront notions of like what could have been, essentially. That's mainly what the film is about. And I will say, I do think parts of the film are a little bit like standard, like Sundance direction in terms of how it approaches the material. I think sometimes the themes were over explained. I think there's like a part early on where they I don't know, there's a couple of parts throughout the film where they like, it's almost like a fourth wall break in how much they're addressing the central drama about like fate versus what just happens in your life. So I struggled to get into it for a little bit, but there's a point towards the end of the film where the film makes the decision I think it needed to make in terms of like what happens with these characters. And once it did that, I was really impressed with kind of how maturely it handled this, because I understand the idea of like looking back on past relationships in your life and going like, what if things have gone a different way? But I also think I think you can get too bogged down in that and not focus on kind of the lived realities of like what's happened since. And I was really pleased with the way that they wrote the character of Nora's husband. I think that he is like, I think the standard rom-com thing to do would be to write him like a piece of shit, but he's not. I mean, he's very funny. He's very like charming. His relationship with Nora is really cute. So even though you definitely feel for Nora and Haesung's kind of what if dynamic, you go like, well, she's not just going to leave her husband for this guy. Like they joke about that at one point, but of course that's not going to happen. Like it's what really matters is the lived reality. But at the same time, I think it's good to acknowledge that those feelings of like, what if I ended up with somebody else, that's a good thing to kind of acknowledge in like their marriage. I think it's very mature of them to do that. I was just really pleased with where the film went. And I think it's a very like sophisticated look at like time and how time affects human relationships. I kind of thought about, I noticed that Celine Song, the director, has Barry Lyndon in her top 10, like her Sight and Sounds top 10, which I can definitely see, because that's another film that really deals with like time and how it affects characters and all that. So even though I think a lot of people left Past Lives feeling kind of broken because of the way things go with the characters, for me, it was oddly uplifting. It was like, you know, people can face those kind of realities of what if in their relationships very maturely, and still kind of move on with their lives with them. I think it's just a really solid movie. I think it is in my top 10 right now. I don't imagine it'll be there by the end of the year. I'm not quite as in love with it as a lot of people are, but I do think it's really great. I'm seeing a lot of like 5 out of 5s like here from other people, but I'm not quite there, but it is really, really solid. Let's see, Sanctuary, yep. Oh, we already got to those comments. Cool. So let's go back a little bit. Okay, next one to talk about. I should have reviewed this when it came out. This would have been fun to talk about. But Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, otherwise known as Indiana Jones 5. So I did a podcast with my friend Jackie about Indiana Jones. We talked about all 4 of the previous films about a year ago or so, maybe a little bit more. And spoiler alert, we're big fans of the first 3, like most people are. And then we're not huge on Crystal Skull. Going back to that podcast, I might be a little bit more positive on Crystal Skull than maybe I would have been regardless. I actually would go as far as to say that the opening half of Crystal Skull is good. Like, I genuinely enjoy most of it. And then it just kind of gets bogged down in CGI and exposition and nonsense in the second half. But, like, first half's pretty solidly made. And all of it feels like, you can tell, despite the fact that it's more digital, you can tell that Spielberg is still directing it. Whereas this one, even though I consider James Mangold to be a very solid, like, kind of director for hire filmmaker, I immediately, from the very first scene, noticed kind of how far we've come from Spielberg's craft. I think that I borderline hated the opening set piece of this movie, because it basically is the exact same set piece from Last Crusade, the opening train thing. But done like with a completely CGI rendered, train and exterior and all that. And the worst part of it was the digital de-aging on Harrison Ford, which I don't think looked terrible, like, relative to digital de-aging. Like, I've heard some people kind of defend that because it looks all right, but I think it's not, the issue isn't how good or bad the digital de-aging is. It's that digital de-aging is just fundamentally really, really evil. Like, it's just like, it's one of the worst things to be invented in film, because it's just a total lie. It takes everything that film is about emotion and character and just like takes it out. It's like, yeah, we can just reconstruct this with a computer and an AI. So it's really, really hated the first kind of opening set piece of it. But throughout the second act of the film, I did start to kind of mildly enjoy myself a little bit. I really like, actually, and I heard a lot of people really kind of giving Phoebe Waller-Bridge shit because she's a woman. I mean, like, basically, that's some of what I heard. People said things like, she can't hold her own in a set piece with Harrison Ford. It's like, Harrison Ford is 80 years old. Like he's the one people should be complaining about being in this movie, not Phoebe Waller-Bridge. And I understand people not liking her character because she's very much like a money mindset character. Like, she's not very altruistic for Indy, and like, she doesn't care about the artifacts like he does. But I kind of like that. I kind of like that she is just kind of a schemer a little bit. I think it creates kind of an interesting character dynamic between Indy and her character. And it's kind of a weird, the fact that they get put together on this journey kind of mirrors the dynamic that Indy has with his dad, Sean Connery, in the third film. And I don't think Phoebe Waller-Bridge is perfect here or anything, but I think she's getting just way too much shit for this performance. I actually think she's pretty solid here, and I kind of liked her. And I also kind of like there were some creative elements with the villains in this, like the Nazis in this are basically like Operation Paperclip types. Like they're like Nazis who like they were Nazis in the war, but then they moved to the U.S. Um, for to provide service for the U.S. in like the space race and stuff like that, and they're kind of forgiven for their atrocities and crimes because of that, which I always think that's kind of an interesting dynamic, a little piece of history people forget about. Um, the implications of it aren't really dealt with much in the film, but I at least appreciated it as a detail. And then the other thing I kind of appreciated, I'm being so positive on this, honestly. I still think it's like a 2 out of 5 movie. But the third act goes so far into schlock territory. It's so ridiculous that I almost kind of appreciated it, like more than I appreciate the climax of Crystal Skull, I think. Like the time travel stuff is just absolutely ridiculous and dealt with in such a cartoonish way. And I was like, is James Mangold doing this intentionally to kind of make this like a schlocky, I don't know. I still think that I still think that fundamentally this movie should never have been made. Like, it's just a mistake to approach Indiana Jones without recasting the lead all these years later, and to do it Disney style with all this CGI goop and like cynical fan service to the original films. Like that stuff was just way too much and way too bad for me to call the film good. But there were details of it that I liked. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, the schlockiness of the second half, the kind of subversions that they do with the villains, things like that. So it was okay. It was almost like a borderline 3-star movie for me, but I still gave it 2. I think I don't think I liked it per se. Yeah. Let's see where else we can go here. There's a few more I want to cover for sure. I'll be real short on this. This was just one that my really good friend Kelsey was like begging me to check out for a while. I saw the trailer for 80 for Brady back in like January, and I thought it was a joke. I thought it looked like the worst thing ever. And then Kelsey was telling me to watch it, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll get around to it at some point. And I watched it on a plane. I will say I did not like the movie, but it's kind of better than I expected it to be. There's a couple of moments where like the comedy works. There's like an Eyes Wide Shut reference, which is funny in a movie with like old ladies, and there's the like there's some funny stuff that happens to them when they get to the Super Bowl and all that. Like there's a couple of moments that work, but largely it's pretty like standard studio comedy, sentimental beats. And it's just like there's a lot of potential for them to do something a lot weirder with this, and they didn't do it. But I still kind of enjoyed watching. Like the ladies clearly had fun, like Sally Field and Lily Tomlin. All the cast was they definitely enjoyed themselves. So I'm not really gonna shit on it too much. I'll be very brief on that. I gave that a 2 out of 5. Another 2 out of 5 for me was 65, which is directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, who were, I believe, involved with A Quiet Place, which is the main reason I was intrigued by this, as well as Adam Driver. It seems kind of like a sure thing premise, like it's like it's a sci-fi movie that kind of harkens back to it kind of harkens back to Jurassic Park a little bit in the setting. But I just found this like incredibly dull. Like the action, despite the fact that A Quiet Place movie, I feel like A Quiet Place really understands set pieces. Like you have the especially the one in the middle of the film, the one where Emily Blunt's character is pregnant and she has to give birth but also be quiet. Like that stuff is very, very good. And nothing in 65 really felt like distinct for me. Like there was nothing, it wasn't terribly filmed. It's just that it all just kind of blurred together. Like it was just this CGI kind of monster fest, and none of it was like distinct enough to register more than like a blur. there's a and I just really and I wish we got I like that the film was short and relatively lean, but I do think we needed a lot more character work with Adam Driver's like pre-Earth background. The connection that he had with his daughter, we kind of get that in the opening scene, and then that's mirrored with this new character that he has to deal with on Earth 65 million years ago. But I don't know. Again, I can kind of respect the attempt to make a film like this. It's just that it really kind of didn't work for me. Didn't hate it or anything. I gave it a 2 out of 5. But yeah, definitely not one that I'll be revisiting much, for sure. Got a few more here. I think like let's see, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4 more. All right. The next one we have is, oh my God, I'm going to talk about Hypnotic. Leon, if you're still watching, I really want to know what you think. And Winslow too, if you've seen it, I'm so curious what you have to say about this. This is one of the stupidest movies I've seen in recent memory, but like kind of enjoyable. Okay, so the premise of this is basically the premise of Cure, because it's about a detective who is investigating, I guess in Cure he's investigating murders, where in this one he's just investigating a missing person. But there's a bunch of crimes that don't really make sense. It's very similar to how Cure is set up, and there's hypnotism involved. And I really don't want to spoil too much of where it goes, because it is so bonkers and entertaining. There's lots of like the twist in it is just gut-bustingly so funny. It's not quite as good as like Stephen Knight's Serenity, where like the twist also has these really perverse implications for what's happened in the film. But it is just so weird and stupid that it's really, really entertaining. I will say it's directed by Robert Rodriguez, who he's mostly made like 3-star movies for me from what I've seen. I need to see some of his like better work, like Sin City and all that. But yeah, it's kind of it's not a very good directing effort from him. I will say it's not a very good looking movie, both in the kind of lighting and in the camera work. But it's, again, just the twists of it are so bizarre that I was like kind of on board with it for a bit. And there are some pretty solid performances. I think God, what's his name? The guy from The Dark Knight, who's like the villain and everything. Yeah, William Fichtner is pretty good in the movie for sure. So yeah, I actually gave it a light 3 out of 5. Maybe this would be like a 5 out of 10 for me in real life. Just it's just so out there and kind of bonkers that I kind of appreciated it and enjoyed watching it, even though I would probably struggle to revisit it, because there's definitely a lot of bits of it that are just kind of dull. Like even for like this 2.3 rating, I think is a mix of like people who don't like fun, so people who don't appreciate the twist, and people who are like, I appreciate that, but it's just kind of dull. I think, and that's kind of where I am, even though I would be kind of more over here with it, I think. So for me, yeah, solidly stupid, but just kind of, it's probably not something I'm going to put on my honorable mentions, but maybe we'll see. Maybe I will. Barbie and Oppenheimer, I haven't reviewed in terms of like a full like video on it, but I did do a stream with Josh, and I think we probably went even more in depth on them than I would have gone in a like 10-minute video. So I definitely suggest checking that out if you haven't seen it yet. But spoiler alert, Barbie was a 4 out of 5 for me, and Oppenheimer was a 5. So very much enjoyed both of them. So huge reason I'm doing this video is so I can talk about Talk to Me as well, because this is a very successful independent horror film from A24, basically made by a couple of YouTubers from Australia who I was not familiar with beforehand, but they seem very passionate for what they're doing. And the premise of this is basically that it opens with like this really impressive one-take shot of a guy walking through a party looking for his friend or brother or something, and the friend just kind of goes crazy and kills somebody at this party. But after that, we kind of cut away to a different group of friends. They kind of discover, kind of Ouija board style, how to conjure spirits using this embalmed hand. And it's like a social media challenge as well, where you're supposed to film yourself doing it. And kind of because of that fame and because of just like the adrenaline thrill of it, they get really hooked on it. And until one of them goes too far and this very horrific incident happens. And the film kind of changes tone pretty quickly. I will say I was really impressed by that scene, the scene where it stops being just fun and it starts being really horrifying and violent. I don't want to spoil what happens, but it's very hard to watch, very kind of gut wrenching in that way. But I think some people are calling this like one of the best horror films of the last decade, and I just can't really get on board with that. For me, the biggest issue was that it really wasn't doing anything to set it apart from other similar films, like thematically or in terms of direction or anything like that. Like I think I was definitely feeling a lot of like the family drama stuff that you find in like Hereditary or The Exorcist, things having to do with guilt, grief. I even thought a little bit about like the Hellraiser remake from last year, which was very much like a film about addiction. But the other film, probably the biggest issue was that I really felt like we needed some psychological engagement about internet culture. Like we really need to understand why these people are so addicted to doing these internet challenges beyond what we can just assume about these characters. I was thinking of something like Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Pulse, which I think really kind of gets into the headspace of what it's like to be very lonely online and somebody that's going to do. And you could take that to an extreme of like a person who's going to do something really desperate to get views, to kind of fill a void in their life or something like that. But the film doesn't really engage with it that well. I definitely felt like it was pretty surface level in that regard. And yeah, no, I just found beyond that the meat of it was just this very standard, like kind of grief-driven family drama. Now, I will say the reason I almost thought I was going to give this movie a 2 at first, but I definitely give it the 3 because the ending is fucking incredible. Like it is really, really kind of recontextualizes what you've been watching. And I almost feel like I need to revisit this before the end of the year because with the ending in mind, I feel like I might think about other aspects of the film differently. Whereas other kind of A24 films kind of recycle, things like Hereditary or The Exorcist in a more basic way, I was very impressed with kind of where this went in the third act. Like the last scene is really, really creepy. So yeah, with the structure in mind, I think I might view it differently. But yeah, I did kind of call it Tide Pod Challenge, the movie, because again, the way it engages with this idea of like internet culture, I did think was pretty surface level. Okay, so let's go through. I think they've got just a couple more here, but yeah. Anyway, so that's like a 3 out of 5 for me as well. Probably will revisit for the end of the year, so if I get give it the upgrade. Last 2 here, we have Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. So I hesitated to see this initially in theaters just because I'm not very caught up on Mission Impossible. I've only seen the first one and the fourth one, but people had told me that like there's a couple details that are taken from like the last couple movies that I might not get, but for the most part, this completely works as a standalone film, and I can confirm that it definitely works as a standalone. So if you've been putting it off for that reason, I would suggest still checking it out if you like this kind of Mission Impossible, like action, espionage kind of stuff. I don't even know if I want to go into the plot here because it's so convoluted, but basically, okay, I can kind of give you a light summary. So basically there's this new weapon that they keep calling the Entity in the film that's threatening humanity for an unspecified reason. Like it reminded me how in Top Gun Maverick they never tell you what the like who the enemy is. In this one, they haven't revealed at all what the entity is, and which I thought was just kind of funny. But basically, like, we want to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands of people who are just going to use it for personal gain or whatever, or just like for control. And so that's what the Impossible Mission Force decides to do is to try and get this key to unlocking this new weapon, but not use it to try and just prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. And it is a very long, very cool, for the most part, kind of globe-trotting epic. And it's only one half. It's only a part one. So I'll start off by saying I'm really not that enamored by this whole like Tom Cruise. I call it the suicidal auteurism project because it just seems like the man wants to die. Like it seems like the man is just like, he loves doing these stunts. He might want to die on camera one day and go down in history with Buster Keaton. So he's kind of becoming a quasi director and like crafting these really solidly made like action spectacles. Again, I've enjoyed the movies enough, Top Gun Maverick, some of the other Mission Impossible ones, for sure. But I think especially Top Gun Maverick, I think some of what it's being praised for comes more from like the time we live in for action. The fact that we don't have people doing these real-time analog stunts, and it's mainly like CGI stuff now. I think it's like refreshing to see that, and that's cool, but it's like I think that's more to do with the times we live in than it is like how good the films are themselves, because I do find Top Gun Maverick to be lacking in character and stakes. Certainly the stakes felt quite low for me, for sure. I feel similarly about this, but the biggest issue was really that it gets so bogged down by exposition. Like it's really like comparing this to like John Wick movies, like John Wick Chapter 4 earlier this year. Those films are so good at telling the story through the action, just kind of visual filmmaking. And the step down in terms of this one, just like kind of having a lot of scenes where, you see characters in shot reverse shot, explaining the plot to each other. It's, it was a noticeable, step down, I think. And I also just kind of struggle sometimes with Mission Impossible movies because they, to me, compared to some other action franchises like Bond or certainly like John Wick or Arnold movies or whatever, they really lack personality. There's some exceptions, like the Simon Pegg character I like. I really like, what is her name? The like French character in this, like this one on the poster. I forget her name, but I think she's fantastic in it. I just really, I think sometimes Mission Impossible gets too bogged down by being about like the actual stunts than about expressing something artistically through the action, which I think John Wick does just like seamlessly. So those were kind of my main issues with it. But at the same time, I can't really be too mean to it because it is a lot of fun, even for how long it is. I never was really bored. Sometimes maybe during the exposition, but like not significantly. And I really like there's kind of a meta angle to this film in which like, one of the biggest threats that we're looking at in the film is AI. Which is a real threat to the movie industry as well. The idea that movies can just be made by a computer or whatever. But I love that the man who is trying to stop AI in this film is Tom Cruise, who in real life is like the poster boy for practical stunts and all that, like anti-AI. So I think there's some really cool like meta angles with it. And it's just fun. It's just good popcorn fun. Like I'm not gonna knock it too much. I just don't think I personally got as much enjoyment out of it as some people did, but it is, I can't deny the craft or anything. I believe the last one to talk about here is something that came out earlier in the year, and I just didn't get around to it. I wasn't really that interested, but the Super Mario's movie, which is new, Illumination Joint. I didn't care for this, to be honest. I totally understand. Like especially if you're a big fan of all the games, which I am, and if you really hate the 90s movie, which I don't like the 90s movie, but I certainly don't hate it. I think you could see this refreshing. It's certainly a lot more true artistically to the game, but it's such a like for me, it's just such a carbon copy of it. Like if you look at the animation, it just looks like the game, and it doesn't really look like it's saying anything. It's not expressing anything about the game like outside of that. I don't know. Just from an aesthetic point of view, I think it's kind of boring. What I did like about it, though, really the reason it was a 2 for me and not a 1 was Jack Black. I think he did some really incredible voice work as Bowser. I think he's really funny. Some of the ways they treat his character, I think I found very entertaining. I even like Seth Rogen as Donkey Kong a little bit. Like that whole fight sequence was just kind of bizarre. They have the whole like Donkey Kong song thing, which all the pop music in Illumination movies usually feels very cynical, and it didn't feel quite as bad as in this one. But what was weird too was I remember when they announced the voice cast for this. The one that really stood out to me as like, oh, that could work is Anya Taylor-Joy as Peach. But weirdly, watching the movie, she felt so like, I don't know, like her voice just really felt so. It felt so much like her, and not like another character. Whereas the other voice actors, I think, managed to kind of sell their characters a little bit better. I don't know. Hers just sounded to me like very out of place. I understand. If you got mild enjoyment out of this, totally understand. I know some people really dug this. It can be popcorn entertainment for some people, I suppose, but it just wasn't for me. So I don't have too much else to say about it, to be honest. So that's about it. I think those are the movies that I kind of caught up with. Or those are the movies that I've seen this year that I'm kind of catching up with in terms of a full review on my channel. I'll go through a few more comments and then I'll probably go ahead and end the stream here. But thank you guys so much for watching, for one. We got Jason. How's it going, man? Thanks for tuning in. Jason says, talking about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, solid action movie, but it's in the middle for me amongst the Mission Impossible movies. Yeah, I think that's so I haven't seen as many as you. I'm guessing you've seen all of them. But for me, I think it's in the middle of the ones I've seen. Like I don't like it as much as like Ghost Protocol or something like that. Like I think Ghost Protocol is actually pretty fantastic. For me, it's like on par with the first one, maybe. I guess, yeah. He says, I had a lot of fun with the Super Mario Bros. I agree the plot isn't great, but for some reason I enjoyed it. It's not even the plot, to be fair. Like for me, it was more just the plot's fine. Like I don't really go to like a Super Mario Bros. Movie like for the plot per se, but it's like just the kind of visual choices felt very like uninspired. I don't know. It felt very much like an Illumination movie, and I don't like their. I think I've liked one movie they've done. I think I've like the original Despicable Me. I think is okay, but I really don't like their filmography. I like the action scenes reminding me of games. That's another thing I forgot to mention is that like the references to the games were not just like the most generic thing that like anybody who's ever heard of Mario would get. Like there's a lot of very specific references to kind of more obscure games and more obscure moments within the games that I picked up on, which I did enjoy for sure. So I appreciated that they didn't just go with the most generic references possible. Like I totally agree with you that like they did a good job with the research on the games for sure. Well, I think that's going to do it for the stream. Thank you guys so much for watching. So now that I've kind of caught up with all the movies that I hadn't previously reviewed, I think I would like to get back onto a more like consistent review schedule. So I don't know if there's anything coming up like super soon that I'm like passionate about reviewing. But definitely like throughout the year, I want to be better about it. I thought about doing maybe a Christopher Nolan rank soon on my channel, just since, with Oppenheimer out and everything. So maybe I'll do that soon. So stay tuned for that. And I'll be on Did You See That stream on Saturday this weekend. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.